The porcelain plate slipped from Lily Abbott's trembling fingers and shattered across the kitchen floor of her uncle's ranch house in Benton, Arkansas, the sound echoing through the sweltering July afternoon of 1878 like a gunshot that sealed her fate. She froze, staring at the scattered fragments of what had been her aunt's favorite serving plate, the one painted with delicate blue flowers that had survived the journey from Tennessee 3 years ago. Her heart hammered against her ribs as heavy footsteps thundered from the back room, and she knew before she even looked up that her Uncle Bernard was coming, that the whiskey he had been drinking since noon would make this so much worse than it needed to be. "What in blazes was that?" Bernard Abbott's voice boomed through the doorway before his massive frame filled it. At 42, he was a mountain of a man who had grown meaner with each passing year since his wife had died from fever 2 winters back, leaving Lily alone with him on this God-forsaken patch of land. "I'm sorry, Uncle Bernard," Lily said quickly, dropping to her knees to gather the broken pieces. "It slipped. I'll clean it up right away. I'll be more careful, I promise." "That was Margaret's plate." His words came out slow and dangerous, each syllable dripping with barely contained rage. "The one her mother gave her before we left Tennessee. I know, I'm so sorry." Lily's hands shook as she picked up the larger shards, cutting her finger on a sharp edge. Blood welled up, bright red against her pale skin, but she barely noticed. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to—" His hand shot out and grabbed her left wrist, yanking her up from the floor with such force that her feet left the ground for a moment. "You didn't mean to? That's all you ever say. You didn't mean to burn the biscuits. You didn't mean to let the chickens out. You didn't mean to cost me money at every turn. Please, Uncle Bernard, you're hurting me." Lily tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to leave bruises. "Hurting you? I'll show you what hurt really is, you careless girl." He twisted her wrist suddenly, viciously, and Lily heard the snap before she felt it, a sickening crack that seemed to reverberate through her entire body. Then the pain came, white hot and blinding, shooting up her arm and stealing the breath from her lungs. She screamed, a sound that was more animal than human, and he released her so abruptly that she fell backward into the pile of broken porcelain. The shards cut into her palms and knees, but all she could feel was her wrist already swelling, the bone jutting at an unnatural angle beneath her skin. "Clean up this mess," Bernard said coldly, stepping over her as if she were nothing more than an obstacle in his path, "and have supper ready by 6. I don't care if you have to do it one-handed." He walked out, leaving her there on the floor, cradling her broken wrist against her chest as tears streamed down her face. The pain was extraordinary, pulsing in waves that made her stomach turn and her vision blur. She had to get help. She had to see a doctor. But the nearest doctor was in Little Rock, more than 100 miles away, and Bernard would never take her. He would tell her to stop being dramatic, to bind it up herself, and get back to work. Lily managed to get to her feet, swaying slightly as another wave of nausea hit her. She wrapped her wrist carefully in her apron, trying to stabilize it, but every movement sent fresh jolts of agony through her arm. She could not stay here. She could not spend another moment in this house with that man, even if it meant leaving with nothing, even if it meant wandering into the wilderness with no plan and no destination. She had to go. She stumbled to her small room off the kitchen and grabbed her mother's shawl, the only thing she had left from before her parents had died in a wagon accident 5 years ago. She was 21 years old and had nothing to show for it but scars and a broken wrist and a desperate need to escape. Using her good hand, she managed to tie the shawl around her shoulders and tuck a few biscuits from breakfast into the pocket of her dress. It was not much, but it would have to do. Bernard was in the barn when she slipped out the front door, and she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that small mercy. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as she made her way down the long dirt road that led away from the ranch, her wrist throbbing with every step. She had no idea where she was going. Benton was a small town, Barely more than a trading post and a few scattered buildings, and she knew most folks there would just send her back to Bernard. He was a landowner, a man of some standing in the community, and she was just his orphaned niece, a burden he had taken in out of duty. The road stretched out before her, wavering in the heat. Arkansas in July was brutal, the humidity thick enough to choke on, and within minutes her dress was soaked with sweat. Her wrist had swollen to twice its normal size, the skin purple and angry, and she knew she was going into shock. Her thoughts became fuzzy, disconnected. She just kept walking, putting one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant thinking about the pain, and thinking about the pain meant giving into it. She did not hear the horse until it was almost beside her, the steady clip-clop of hooves on packed dirt cutting through the haze in her mind. She looked up, squinting against the sun, and saw a man on a bay mare, tall in the saddle with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. "Madam?" His voice was deep and concerned. "You all right?" Lily tried to answer, tried to say she was fine, but the words would not come. Instead, her knees buckled and she felt herself falling. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground, and she found herself looking up into the most striking face she had ever seen. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. There was a gentleness in those eyes that made something in her chest tighten. "Easy now," he said, lowering her carefully to sit on the side of the road. "Let me take a look at you." His gaze went immediately to her wrist, still wrapped in her apron, and his jaw tightened. "That needs tending. What happened?" "I fell," Lily said automatically, the lie coming easily after years of practice. You did not tell people the truth about what happened behind closed doors. You did not air family business to strangers. The man looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching her face, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her lie. But he did not press. Instead, he said, "I'm Jackson Reeves. I got a camp about a mile from here. I can splint that wrist for you, get you some water. You look about ready to pass out from the heat. I don't want to be any trouble." The words came out automatically, another lesson learned from living with Bernard. Do not be a burden. Do not ask for help. Do not take up space. "No trouble at all," Jackson said firmly. He stood and offered her his hand. "Can you ride? Or would you rather I walk with you?" Lily looked up at the big bay mare, then down at her wrist. The thought of trying to mount a horse made her want to cry. "I can walk," she said, though she was not entirely sure that was true. Jackson seemed to sense her hesitation. "Tell you what, you can ride, and I'll walk alongside. Luna here is gentle as a lamb. She won't give you any trouble." Before Lily could protest, he had lifted her into the saddle with surprising ease, careful not to jostle her injured arm. She settled onto the worn leather, gripping the saddle horn with her good hand, and Jackson took the reins, leading the horse down the road at an easy pace. "You got a name?" he asked after a moment. "Lily Abbott." "Well, Miss Abbott, you mind telling me the truth about what happened to your wrist? Because I've seen plenty of injuries in my time, and that doesn't look like something you got from falling." Lily stared straight ahead, not wanting to meet his eyes. "It's not your concern." "Maybe not," Jackson agreed, "but I'm making it my concern anyway. Someone hurt you. Someone twisted your arm hard enough to break it, from the looks of things." She said nothing, and he did not push further. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the horse's hooves on the dirt and the buzz of cicadas in the trees. Lily felt herself relaxing slightly despite the pain. There was something calming about this man, something that made her feel safer than she had felt in years. Jackson's camp was set up in a grove of oak trees beside a small creek, a simple setup with a bedroll, a cooking fire, and supplies neatly packed in saddlebags. He helped her down from the horse and guided her to sit on a fallen log near the fire pit. "Let me see that wrist," he said gently, kneeling in front of her. Lily unwrapped the apron with shaking fingers, hissing through her teeth as the fabric pulled away from her swollen skin. Jackson's expression darkened when he saw the injury. his hands hovering over it without touching. "This is bad," he said quietly. "Bone's definitely broken. I can splint it, but you really should see a doctor." "There's no doctor in Benton," Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper, saying, "I can't go back." Jackson looked at her for a long moment, and she saw understanding dawn in his eyes. "Your uncle did this." It was not a question. Lily felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "It doesn't matter. I'm leaving. I just need to get far enough away that he won't come looking." "It does matter," Jackson said fiercely. "No man has the right to lay hands on a woman like that. I don't care if he's blood or not." He stood and went to his saddlebags, pulling out a clean white shirt and tearing it into strips. Then he found 2 straight pieces of wood from the firewood pile and returned to her side. "This is going to hurt," he warned, "but I need to make sure the bone is set right before I splint it. You ready?" Lily nodded, biting down on her lower lip. Jackson worked quickly and efficiently, his hands gentle but firm as he felt along the break. When he set the bone, the pain was so intense that black spots danced in front of her eyes, but she did not cry out. She had learned long ago how to suffer in silence. "Good girl," Jackson murmured, wrapping the splint with the strips of fabric. "You're tougher than you look. There. That should hold until we can get you to a proper doctor." "Thank you," Lily said, looking down at her bandaged wrist. It still hurt, but the splint kept it stable, and that was something. "I don't have any money to pay you." "I don't want your money." Jackson sat back on his heels, studying her with those warm, steady eyes. "I want you to tell me you have somewhere safe to go." Lily opened her mouth to lie, to tell him she had family in the next town or friends who would take her in, but she found she could not. There was something about this man that made lying feel wrong. "I don't," she admitted, "but I'll figure something out. I always do." Jackson was quiet for a moment, and then he stood and held out his hand. "Come on, let's get some food in you, and then we'll talk about what comes next." He had rabbit stew simmering over the fire, and the smell made Lily's stomach growl loudly enough that Jackson smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and somehow more approachable. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, ladling stew into a tin bowl. "This morning." Lily took the bowl gratefully, balancing it on her lap and eating carefully with her good hand. The stew was delicious, rich and savory, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down too quickly. Jackson settled beside her with his own bowl, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and Lily felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt like she could breathe. "I'm heading to Fort Smith," Jackson said eventually, setting his empty bowl aside. "Got a job there, working on a cattle ranch. The owner is a good man, fair with his workers. He and his wife might need help at the house, someone to cook and clean. If you want, you could come with me. I can introduce you, vouch for you." Lily looked at him in surprise. "You would do that? For a stranger?" "You're not a stranger anymore," Jackson said simply. "You're someone who needs help, and I'm someone who can provide it. Seems pretty straightforward to me." "But why?" Lily could not understand it. In her experience, people did not help without expecting something in return, and the thought of what Jackson might want from her made her stomach twist. Jackson seemed to read her thoughts because his expression softened. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because I know what it's like to feel trapped, to have nowhere to turn. Someone helped me once when I needed it. I'm just passing that kindness forward." There was a story there, Lily could tell, but she did not press. Instead, she said, "Fort Smith is a long way from here. 3 days' ride, give or take. You can ride with me and we'll take it slow so we don't jostle that wrist too much." Jackson stood and began cleaning up the dishes. "You don't have to decide right now. Sleep on it. But I'll tell you this. Going off on your own with no money and a broken wrist is a good way to end up dead or worse. At least with me, you'll have protection and a destination." He was right, and Lily knew it. She watched him move around the camp, banking the fire and spreading out his bedroll, and tried to quiet the voice in her head that said trusting him was a mistake. but he had been nothing but kind to her. He had helped her when he had no reason to, had tended her injury and offered her a way out. Maybe, just maybe, not all men were like her uncle. "You can have the bedroll," Jackson said, interrupting her thoughts. "I'll sleep on the ground." "I can't take your bed," Lily protested. "You're injured, and you've had a hell of a day. You take the bed." His tone left no room for argument. "Get some rest, Miss Abbott. Tomorrow's going to be a long day either way." Lily lay down on the bedroll, pulling her mother's shawl around her like a blanket. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender, the way her mother had always smelled, and fresh tears sprang to her eyes. She wondered what her mother would think of all this, of the way her life had turned out. Would she be disappointed? Ashamed? Or would she understand that sometimes survival meant running, meant accepting help from strangers and hoping for the best? She fell asleep to the sound of the creek babbling nearby and the quiet sounds of Jackson settling down for the night. And for the first time in years, she felt something that might have been hope. When Lily woke, the sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, and Jackson was already up, making coffee over a newly rebuilt fire. The smell made her sit up, wincing as the movement jarred her wrist. "Morning," Jackson said, glancing over at her. "How's the arm?" "Sore," Lily admitted, looking down at the splint. The swelling had gone down a little overnight, but it still throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. Jackson poured coffee into 2 tin cups and brought one over to her. "Drink this. It'll help wake you up." Lily accepted the cup, wrapping her good hand around it and savoring the warmth. "I've decided," she said quietly. "I'd like to go to Fort Smith with you, if the offer still stands." Jackson's face broke into that smile again, the one that made him look almost boyish. "Offer stands. I'm glad you're coming. I think this is going to work out well for both of us." They broke camp quickly, Jackson moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent a lot of time on the trail. He helped Lily onto Luna, making sure she was settled comfortably before mounting up behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold the reins. It was intimate, being pressed against him like this, and Lily felt her cheeks heat, but Jackson seemed completely unbothered by it. "Just relax," he said, his breath warm against her ear. "I've got you. You won't fall." They rode through the morning, following the road north out of Benton. The landscape was beautiful in its own wild way, all rolling hills and dense forests broken up by the occasional farm or homestead. Jackson pointed out landmarks as they went, telling her stories about the places they passed. He had been traveling for years, he explained, taking jobs where he could find them, never staying in one place too long. "What made you decide to settle in Fort Smith?" Lily asked, twisting slightly to look at him. "Time to put down roots, I guess," Jackson said thoughtfully. "I'm 26 years old, and I don't have much to show for all my wandering except saddle sores and a good horse. The ranch in Fort Smith is a real opportunity. The owner, Samuel Hartley, he treats his workers like family. I figure if I work hard, save my money, maybe in a few years I can have a place of my own." "That sounds nice," Lily said wistfully. "Having a place that's really yours, where you feel safe." Jackson's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "You'll have that too, I promise. We'll make sure you land on your feet in Fort Smith." They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat a cold lunch of jerky and hardtack. Lily's wrist was aching fiercely by then, jostled despite Jackson's careful riding, and she must have looked paler than usual because he insisted she take a few sips from a flask he produced from his saddlebag. "What is this?" she asked, coughing as the liquid burned down her throat. "Whiskey. For the pain." Jackson took the flask back and capped it. "Not too much, or you'll be drunk before we get back on the horse." The whiskey did help, warming her from the inside and taking the edge off the pain. They rested for an hour in the shade of a massive oak tree, and Jackson told her more about Fort Smith. It was a growing town, he said, with a military fort and a thriving trade industry. There were opportunities there for people willing to work, and the Hartley Ranch was one of the most respected operations in the area. "Mrs. Hartley is going to love you," Jackson said with certainty. "She's always complaining that she needs more help around the house, especially now that they're expecting their fourth child? You really think they'll hire me? Lily could not quite believe it could be that easy. I know they will. You can cook, can't you, and clean? I've been running my uncle's household since my aunt died. I can do all of that and more. Then it's settled. Jackson stood and offered her his hand. Come on, we should get moving if we want to make it to the next town before dark. We'll stop there for the night, get you a proper bed to sleep in. They rode through the afternoon, the sun beating down relentlessly. Jackson kept up a steady stream of conversation, asking Lily about her life before she came to live with her uncle, about her parents and her childhood. She found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone else, telling him about her mother's laugh and her father's terrible singing, and the little house in Tennessee where she had grown up. It felt good to remember the happy times, to talk about her parents as people rather than just ghosts. They sound like they were good people, Jackson said softly when she finished. They were. I still miss them every day. That's how you know they mattered. The missing means they made a difference in your life. They reached the town of Louisville just as the sun was setting, a small settlement with a general store, a saloon, and a boarding house. Jackson helped Lily down from the horse and led her into the boarding house, where a plump, matronly woman greeted them with a warm smile. We need 2 rooms for the night, Jackson said, pulling out a handful of coins, and a hot meal if you've got it. I have 1 room left, the woman said apologetically, but it has 2 beds. Will that do? Jackson looked at Lily, who nodded. She trusted him, she realized with some surprise. After only a day, she trusted this man not to hurt her. That'll be fine, Jackson said, handing over the money. The room was small but clean, with 2 narrow beds separated by a washstand. Jackson set his saddlebags down and turned to Lily. Why don't you rest while I go take care of Luna and get us some food? I'll bring something up. I can come down, Lily started to protest, but Jackson shook his head. You're exhausted, and that wrist needs rest. Stay here, I'll be back soon. He left before she could argue further, and Lily sank onto one of the beds with a sigh of relief. Her whole body ached, and her wrist was throbbing in time with her heartbeat. She lay back and closed her eyes just for a moment, and when she opened them again, Jackson was back with a tray of food. I didn't mean to fall asleep, she said, sitting up quickly. Don't apologize. You needed it. Jackson set the tray on the washstand and pulled up a chair. And come on, let's eat, and then you can go right back to sleep. The food was simple, but filling. Stew and fresh bread with butter, and a slice of apple pie for dessert. They ate together, and afterward Jackson checked her splint, making sure it was still secure. It's holding up well, he said, rewrapping one of the looser strips of fabric. Another day or 2 and we'll be in Fort Smith. We'll get you to a doctor then, make sure everything's healing right. Jackson? Lily said as he stood to move back to his own bed. Thank you for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't found me. Jackson paused, looking down at her with an expression she could not quite read. You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad I was there. He hesitated, then added, Your uncle, he's not going to come looking for you? I don't think so. He'll be angry that I left, but he won't want the scandal of people knowing I ran away. He'll probably tell folks I went to stay with relatives or something. Lily pulled the blanket up to her chin. Besides, he's probably relieved to be rid of me. I was just a mouth to feed as far as he was concerned. Then he's a fool, Jackson said firmly, and you're better off without him. They settled into their separate beds, and Lily lay awake for a while, listening to Jackson's steady breathing and trying to process everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she had been trapped in her uncle's house, convinced that was all her life would ever be. Now she was heading to a new town with a kind stranger who had shown her more consideration in 1 day than her uncle had in 5 years. It felt like a dream, too good to be real, and she was afraid that at any moment she would wake up and find herself back in that kitchen, broken plate at her feet, and her uncle's angry face looming over her. But morning came, and she was still in the boarding house room with Jackson already up and packing his things. They had a quick breakfast downstairs, then set out again, following the road northwest toward Fort Smith. The routine of the previous day repeated itself, riding, talking, stopping to rest, riding some more. Jackson was patient with her, never pushing too hard or too fast, always making sure she was comfortable before they continued on. By the second night, they stopped at another small town, and this time Jackson managed to secure 2 separate rooms. Lily was almost disappointed. She had grown used to his presence, found comfort in knowing he was nearby, but she did not say anything, just thanked him and went to her room, where she lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the man on the other side of the wall. The 3rd day of travel was the hardest. Lily's wrist had started to itch beneath the splint, a maddening sensation she could not scratch, and the heat was oppressive, making her feel sluggish and irritable. Jackson noticed her discomfort and tried to distract her with stories, telling her about some of the more colorful characters he had met in his travels. There was the prospector in Colorado who swore he had found gold but could never remember where he buried it. The saloon girl in Dodge City who could outshoot any man in town. The preacher in Santa Fe who ran a gambling den out of the back of his church. "You've seen a lot of the country," Lily said, a touch of envy in her voice. "I have. And I'll tell you what, it's all beautiful, but it's also all the same in some ways. People are people, no matter where you go. Some are good, some are bad, most are somewhere in between, just trying to get by. Which kind are you?" The question slipped out before Lily could stop it. Jackson thought about it for a moment. "I like to think I'm one of the good ones, but I guess that's not really for me to decide, is it? That's for other people to judge." "I think you're good," Lily said quietly. "I think you're one of the best people I've ever met." She felt Jackson's chest rise and fall with a deep breath, but he did not respond, and they rode on in silence. Fort Smith appeared on the horizon late that afternoon, sprawling and bustling compared to the small towns they had passed through. The military fort dominated the skyline, and the streets were filled with people going about their business: merchants, soldiers, families, cowboys. It was overwhelming after the quiet of the trail, and Lily found herself pressing back against Jackson, suddenly nervous. "It's all right," he murmured. "I've got you. We'll go straight to the ranch. It's just outside of town." The Hartley Ranch was everything Jackson had promised and more. A large, well-maintained house sat at the center of the property, surrounded by barns, corrals, and bunkhouses. Cattle grazed in the distant fields, and the whole place had an air of prosperity and good management. Jackson dismounted and helped Lily down, then led her up to the main house. Before they even reached the porch, the door opened and a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair stepped out. "Jackson Reeves!" The man's face split into a wide grin. "You made it. We've been expecting you." "Mr. Hartley?" Jackson shook the man's hand warmly. "Good to see you, sir. This is Miss Lily Abbott. She's had some trouble, and I was hoping you and Mrs. Hartley might be able to help her out." Samuel Hartley's sharp eyes took in Lily's splinted wrist and worn dress, and his expression softened. "Of course. Any friend of Jackson's is welcome here. Come on inside, both of you. Martha will want to meet you, Miss Abbott." Martha Hartley was a petite woman with kind eyes and graying blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun. She took one look at Lily and immediately ushered her to a chair in the spacious kitchen, calling for water and bandages. "Jackson, what happened to this poor girl?" she demanded, carefully examining the splint. "Her uncle broke her wrist," Jackson said bluntly. "She needed to get away, so I brought her here. I thought maybe you could use some help around the house, and she needs a safe place to stay." Martha's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Men who raise their hands to women deserve to be horsewhipped," she said fiercely. Then she turned to Lily with a gentle smile. "You poor dear. Of course you can stay here. We'll get you to the doctor first thing tomorrow. Make sure this wrist is healing properly. In the meantime, you'll have a room in the house, and we'll talk about the work arrangement later. Right now, you just need to rest and recover." Lily felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." "Nonsense. We're happy to have you." Martha patted her hand carefully. "Now, let me show you to your room. Jackson, Samuel will want to talk to you about your duties. You'll be staying in the bunkhouse with the other hands." Over the next few weeks, Lily settled into life at the Hartley Ranch. True to her word, Martha took her to see the doctor the very next day. Dr. Peterson examined her wrist carefully and then told her that Jackson had done an excellent job with the splint and that the bone was healing well. He put her in a proper cast and told her to keep it on for another month, and that was that. Lily's duties at the ranch were light at first given her injury. She helped Martha with meal planning, mending, and light housework, gradually taking on more as her wrist healed. The Hartleys were wonderful employers, treating her more like family than a servant. Their 3 children, ranging in age from 4 to 10, quickly adopted her as a favorite playmate, and Lily found herself laughing more in those first few weeks than she had in years. But what she looked forward to most were the evenings when Jackson would come up to the main house after his work was done. He always had an excuse. He needed to speak to Mr. Hartley about something, or he wanted to check on her wrist, or he was just passing through. But Lily knew the real reason because she felt it too, this pull between them that grew stronger every day. They would sit on the porch after dinner talking as the sun set and the crickets began their nightly chorus. Jackson told her more about his travels, and Lily told him about her dreams for the future. She wanted a home, she said, a real home where she felt safe and loved. She wanted a family someday, children who would never know what it was like to be afraid in their own house. She wanted a life that was her own, not dictated by someone else's cruelty or whims. "You'll have all that," Jackson said with quiet certainty. "You deserve it, and you'll have it." "What about you?" Lily asked. "What do you want?" Jackson was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the darkening horizon. "I want what you want," he finally said. "A home, a family, someone to share it all with." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I think I might have found it." Lily's heart began to pound. Jackson. "I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we've only known each other a few weeks and you've been through hell. But I need you to know how I feel, Lily. From the moment I saw you on that road, something in me just knew that you were different, knew that I wanted to be the one to keep you safe, to make you smile. I'm falling in love with you. Hell, I think I'm already there." Lily stared at him, her mind racing. She should be cautious, should protect her heart, should not let herself fall for the first man who showed her kindness. But when she looked at Jackson, at his earnest face and warm eyes, she knew it was too late for caution. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I was so scared to admit it, but I feel it too." Jackson's face broke into the most beautiful smile she had ever seen, and he reached out to cup her cheek with his hand. "Can I kiss you?" Lily nodded, unable to speak, and Jackson leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a promise more than a demand. Lily felt something inside her unfurl, like a flower opening to the sun, and she kissed him back, pouring all her hope and longing and gratitude into that single moment of connection. When they pulled apart, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to do right by you," he said softly. "I'm going to work hard and save money, and when I have enough, I'm going to build us a house. Not a big fancy one, but something solid and warm, a place that's ours. And I'm going to marry you if you'll have me, and we'll fill that house with love and laughter and all the things you've been missing." "That sounds perfect," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. But this time, they were happy tears, tears of relief and joy and a future that was finally bright. "I'm not asking you to marry me right now," Jackson clarified, pulling back slightly. "I want to court you properly. I want to give you time to be sure, to know that this is what you really want. But I need you to know my intentions are serious." "I know," Lily said, smiling through her tears. "And I want that too. All of it." They sat together on the porch until the stars came out, holding hands and planning a future that had seemed impossible just a month before. When Martha called Lily in for the night, Jackson walked her to the door, kissed her forehead gently, and told her he would see her tomorrow. The months that followed were the happiest of Lily's life. Her wrist healed completely, leaving only a small scar as a reminder of what she had survived. She threw herself into her work at the ranch, learning everything Martha could teach her about running a household. She became indispensable to the family, and Martha told her repeatedly that she did not know how she had managed before Lily arrived. Jackson was equally industrious, working from dawn until dusk, saving every penny he could. On Sundays, their one day off, he would take Lily into town or on long rides through the countryside, always chaperoned by one of the older ranch hands or Martha herself. They were proper in their courtship, never crossing lines that should not be crossed, but the connection between them deepened with each passing day. In October, 6 months after they had met, Jackson took Lily to a spot overlooking the Arkansas River, where the autumn leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold. He had packed a picnic, and they sat on a blanket eating fried chicken and biscuits while watching the water flow by below. "I've been saving," Jackson said as they finished eating. "I've got enough now for a piece of land. Nothing huge, but enough to build a small house and start a modest herd. Mr. Hartley has agreed to sell me some of his cattle at a fair price, and he says I can continue working for him part-time while I get my own place established." Lily's heart was racing. She knew what was coming, had been waiting for it, hoping for it. Jackson turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Lily Abbott, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You're strong and kind and brave, and every day I spend with you is a gift. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, building a home with you, raising a family with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Lily said without hesitation, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Jackson laughed and held her tight, then pulled back to slide the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They were married in November, in a small ceremony at the Fort Smith Church, with the Hartleys and the ranch hands in attendance. Martha cried happy tears and fussed over Lily's dress, which she had helped sew from beautiful cream-colored fabric. Samuel gave Lily away, standing in as the father she no longer had. And when Jackson said his vows, his voice was strong and sure, promising to love and cherish her all the days of his life. Lily's vows were equally heartfelt. She promised to be his partner, his companion, his safe harbor in any storm. She promised to build a life with him, to support his dreams and share his burdens, and she promised to love him with everything she had for as long as she lived. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Jackson kissed her thoroughly. To the cheers and applause of their friends, it was perfect, everything Lily had ever dreamed of and more. They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Fort Smith, a luxury they could barely afford but that Jackson insisted on. He was gentle with her, patient and loving, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Lily marveled at how far she had come. A year ago, she had been broken and hopeless. Now she was a wife, with a husband who adored her and a future full of promise. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "How lucky I am. How different my life is now." "We're both lucky," Jackson corrected. "I found you when I needed you most, even if I didn't know it at the time. You've made me a better man, Lily Reeves." Lily smiled at the sound of her new name. Lily Reeves. It sounded right, like it was always meant to be. They moved into their new house in January of 1879, a small but sturdy structure that Jackson had built with his own hands over the previous months. It had 2 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen and fireplace, and a bedroom. It was not much, but it was theirs, and Lily loved every inch of it. She made curtains for the windows and planted a garden in the spring. Jackson built furniture, a table, chairs, a bed frame. Together they created a home, filling it with laughter and love and the comfortable rhythms of married life. Jackson continued to work part-time for the Hartleys while building up his own cattle operation, and Lily took in sewing and baking to earn extra money. By summer, Lily knew she was pregnant. She told Jackson one evening as they sat on their small porch watching the sunset, and his face lit up with such pure joy that she started crying again. "A baby," he said wonderingly, placing his hand gently on her still flat stomach. We're going to have a baby. Are you happy? Lily asked, even though she could see the answer in his eyes. Happy doesn't even begin to cover it. I'm thrilled. I'm terrified. I'm so in love with you, I can barely stand it. He kissed her softly. We're going to be parents. The pregnancy was easy, and Lily bloomed with health and happiness. Martha fussed over her constantly, making sure she rested and ate properly. Jackson was equally protective, doing everything he could to make things easier for her. Their son was born in March of 1880, a healthy, squalling baby boy with dark hair and his father's eyes. They named him James, after Jackson's father, and from the moment Lily held him, she knew her heart would never be the same. This was what she had been missing, what she had been longing for all those years in her uncle's house. This feeling of completeness, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Jackson was a wonderful father, patient and loving and endlessly fascinated by his son. He would spend hours just watching James sleep, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. In the evenings, he would hold the baby while Lily made dinner, talking to him about the ranch and the cattle and all the things they would do together when James was older. Life settled into a new rhythm, busier now with a baby, but no less happy. Lily had everything she had ever wanted. A husband who loved her, a child who filled her days with joy, a home that was truly hers. The memory of her uncle and that terrible day in Benton seemed like it had happened to someone else, in another lifetime. When James was 6 months old, Lily received a letter. It had been forwarded through Martha, who had given the Benton postmaster the ranch address in case anyone needed to contact Lily. The letter was from a lawyer in Little Rock, informing her that Bernard Abbott had died of a heart attack and that she was his sole heir. There was not much, the letter said, just the ranch and a small amount of money in the bank, but it was hers if she wanted it. Lily showed the letter to Jackson that evening, her hands shaking slightly. She did not know how to feel. Relief that Bernard was gone and could never hurt anyone again. Guilt that she felt no grief. Anxiety about what to do with the inheritance. What do you want to do? Jackson asked, reading the letter carefully. I don't want the ranch, Lily said immediately. I don't ever want to go back there. But the money could help us. We could expand our herd, maybe add another room to the house. We don't need his money, Jackson said firmly. We're doing just fine on our own. But if you want to claim it, I'll support you. And if you want nothing to do with it, I'll support that too. This is your decision, Lily. Lily thought about it for several days. In the end, she wrote back to the lawyer, instructing him to sell the ranch and donate the proceeds to an orphanage in Little Rock. She kept only a few personal items, some photographs of her parents, her mother's wedding ring, and a quilt her aunt had made. Everything else she let go. I don't want anything from him, she explained to Jackson when it was done. I want to move forward, not backward. Our life is here, with what we've built together. Jackson pulled her into his arms. I'm proud of you. That took strength. I learned from the best, Lily said, looking up at him with a smile. The years passed, marked by small joys and quiet triumphs. Their cattle operation grew slowly but steadily, and they were able to hire a hand to help with the work. Lily continued her sewing and baking, building a reputation in Fort Smith for her skills. She and Martha remained close friends, and the Hartley children adored little James, treating him like a beloved cousin. In the spring of 1882, Lily gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Lucy after Lily's mother. She was a sweet, placid baby, completely different from James's energetic personality, and Jackson doted on her shamelessly. I'm outnumbered now, he would joke, holding Lucy while James clung to his leg, 3 against 1. You love it, Lily would reply, and he could not deny it. Their third child, another son they named Robert, arrived in 1884. By then, they had expanded the house, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. The ranch was thriving, and Jackson had proven himself to be an astute businessman as well as a hard worker. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable. And more importantly, they were happy. One evening in the fall of 1885, when James was 5 and already talking about wanting to be a cowboy like his father, Jackson and Lily sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard. Robert was toddling around, Lucy was picking flowers, and James was demonstrating his roping skills with a piece of old rope and a fence post. "Remember when we met," Jackson said, taking Lily's hand, "7 years ago on that road outside Benton?" "Of course I remember. You saved my life that day." "I think we saved each other," Jackson corrected. "I was lost before I met you, Lily. I had no direction, no purpose. You gave me a reason to settle down, to build something lasting." Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so broken. I didn't think I would ever feel safe again, but you showed me what real love looks like. You showed me that not all men are cruel, that kindness and strength can exist in the same person." "I love you," Jackson said simply, "more now than ever. Watching you with our children, seeing the home we've built, the life we've created together, it's everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you too," Lily said, turning to kiss him. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for seeing past the scared, hurt girl I was and loving me anyway." "I didn't love you anyway," Jackson said. "I loved you because of who you were, because you were brave enough to keep going even when everything seemed hopeless, because you were strong enough to trust again after being betrayed, because you were kind even though kindness had been denied to you. That's who I fell in love with, and that's who I'll love until my last breath." They sat together as the sun set, their children's laughter filling the air, and Lily felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was her life now. This was her family, and it was more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. There were hard times, droughts that threatened the cattle, illnesses that swept through the region, the constant worry that came with raising children in a still wild land. But through it all, Jackson and Lily faced everything together, their love a steady anchor in the storms of life. In 1888, when Lily was 31 and Jackson was 36, they welcomed their fourth and final child, a daughter they named Margaret after Jackson's mother. By then, James was 8 and already helping with the ranch work. Lucy was 6 and showing a talent for music, practicing on the piano they had saved up to buy. Robert was 4 and into everything, a curious, fearless boy who kept Lily constantly on her toes. Their house was always full of noise and activity, but it was also full of love. Jackson made sure to spend individual time with each child, teaching them skills they would need, but also just listening to their dreams and fears. Lily created traditions that bound them together as a family: Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, bedtime stories that stretched on for hours. One spring afternoon in 1890, Lily was in the garden planting vegetables when she heard a horse approaching. She looked up, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a stranger riding toward the house. He was elderly, with white hair and a tired face, and he dismounted slowly, as if every movement pained him. "Can I help you?" Lily called, wiping dirt from her hands. "I'm looking for Lily Abbott," the man said. "I was told she might be here." "I'm Lily Reeves now," Lily said, suddenly wary. "I was Lily Abbott." The man's face crumpled slightly. "I'm Walter Abbott, Bernard's brother, your uncle by marriage." Lily felt her stomach drop. She had not thought about Bernard or that side of the family in years. "What do you want?" "I came to apologize," Walter said, his voice breaking. "I heard what Bernard did to you, how he treated you after Margaret died. I should have checked on you, should have made sure you were all right. I lived all the way in Missouri, and we weren't close, but that's no excuse. I failed you, and I'm sorry." Lily stared at him, not knowing what to say. She had never expected this, never thought anyone from that part of her life would seek her out. "I also wanted you to know," Walter continued, "that Bernard's actions were his own. The rest of the family, we're not like that. We don't condone what he did. And if you ever need anything, ever want to connect with your blood family, You have cousins in Missouri who would be happy to know you." Lily felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thank you for coming all this way to tell me that. It means more than you know." Walter nodded, looking relieved. "You have a good life here?" "The best life," Lily said, looking back at the house, where she could hear her children playing inside. "I have a wonderful husband and 4 beautiful children. I'm happy." "I'm glad," Walter said sincerely. "You deserved that. I'm just sorry it took so long to find you." They talked for a little while longer, and Lily gave him tea and some of her homemade cookies. Walter met Jackson when he came in from the fields and shook his hand firmly, thanking him for taking care of Lily. Before he left, he gave Lily an address in Missouri and made her promise to write if she ever wanted to visit. After he rode away, Jackson wrapped his arms around Lily from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You all right?" "I am," Lily said, and she meant it. "It was strange, but good. I think it helped me close a door I didn't even realize was still open." "Good, because we have enough doors open around here without worrying about old ones." Jackson turned her to face him. "I love you, Mrs. Reeves." "I love you too, Mr. Reeves." In 1895, when James was 15, he asked his parents if he could start working full-time on the ranch instead of continuing his schooling. Jackson and Lily had a long discussion about it, weighing his maturity and capability against their desire for him to have more education. In the end, they agreed, with the stipulation that he continue reading and learning on his own time. James proved to be a natural cattleman, with an instinct for the work that even surpassed Jackson's. By the time he was 18, he was essentially running the day-to-day operations, allowing Jackson to slow down a bit and spend more time with the younger children. Lucy married at 19, a nice young man from Fort Smith who worked as a clerk in his father's dry goods store. It was a beautiful wedding, and Lily cried through the entire ceremony, remembering her own wedding day and how far they had all come. Robert, true to his adventurous nature, decided to join the Army when he turned 18 in 1902. It broke Lily's heart to see him go, but she was proud of him too, proud of the fine young man he had become. Margaret, their baby, surprised everyone by announcing at 16 that she wanted to be a teacher. She was the first person in either family to go to college, attending a teacher's school in Little Rock. Lily and Jackson could not have been more proud. By 1905, Jackson and Lily were in their 50s, their children grown and starting families of their own. James had married and was raising his own children on an adjacent piece of land they had helped him buy. Lucy had 3 children and lived in town. Robert wrote letters from wherever the Army sent him. Margaret was teaching at a school in Little Rock and courting a lawyer. One evening, Jackson and Lily sat on their porch, just as they had done countless times over the years. The house behind them was quiet now, so different from the chaotic, noisy years when the children were small. But it was a peaceful quiet, one filled with memories and love. "We did good," Jackson said, looking out over the land they had built their life on. "Look at all this. Look at what we created." "We did," Lily agreed, taking his hand. Their hands were older now, marked with age spots and wrinkles, but their grip was as firm as ever. "I never could have imagined this when you found me on that road." "I knew," Jackson said with a smile. "From that very first day, I knew you were going to be the most important person in my life." "Do you remember what you said to me?" Lily asked. "When you were splinting my wrist?" "I said accidents happen, because they do, and breaking your wrist was an accident, even if what your uncle did wasn't." Jackson turned to look at her. "But you know what else was an accident? Me finding you. Me being on that exact road at that exact time. That was chance, fate, and accident. And it was the best accident that ever happened to me." "To both of us," Lily said, leaning in to kiss him. They sat together as the stars came out, talking about their grandchildren and making plans for the future. There was still so much life ahead of them, so many more sunsets to watch and memories to make. In 1912, Jackson and Lily celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. James and his wife had given them 5 grandchildren. Lucy had 4. Robert, now out of the Army, had married and had 2. Margaret had 3. The house was full to bursting with noise and laughter. 3 generations gathered to celebrate a love story that had started with a broken wrist and a cowboy's kindness. As Jackson toasted his wife, his voice still strong despite his years, he looked around at all the faces watching them and felt his heart swell with pride and gratitude. 35 years ago, he said, I met the most extraordinary woman on a dusty road in Arkansas. She was hurt and scared and had every reason to never trust another person again. But she trusted me. She let me help her. And then she gave me the greatest gift I could ever receive. Her love. Everything you see here, everyone in this room exists because of that moment, that choice. So here's to Lily, the strongest, bravest, most loving woman I've ever known. And here's to accidents that change your life for the better. Everyone raised their glasses, and Lily stood to kiss her husband, not caring that all their children and grandchildren were watching. Let them see, she thought. Let them see what real love looks like, so they know what to look for in their own lives. Jackson and Lily lived well into their 70s, blessed with good health and continued happiness. They watched their grandchildren grow, saw some of them marry and start families of their own. They celebrated holidays and birthdays, weathered losses and celebrated victories, and through it all, their love remained constant. When Jackson passed away in 1923 at the age of 71, he died peacefully in his sleep with Lily beside him. She held his hand and told him she loved him, told him to wait for her because she would be along eventually and they would be together again. Lily lived another 5 years, surrounded by her family, telling stories about the old days and making sure the grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew where they came from. She talked about their grandfather, about how he had saved her, had loved her, had built a life with her that was more beautiful than anything she had ever dreamed possible. She told them about a summer day in 1878 when she had been broken and hopeless, when a kind cowboy had found her on a road outside Benton and had looked at her injured wrist and said those simple words that had meant so much. Accidents happen. She told them how that cowboy had splinted her wrist, had given her hope, had shown her that kindness still existed in the world. And she told them about love, real love, the kind that weathers storms and lasts through the years, the kind that builds homes and raises families and creates legacies, the kind that starts with one person seeing another person's pain and choosing to help, simply because it is the right thing to do. When Lily passed away in 1928 at the age of 71, she died with a smile on her face, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her. They buried her next to Jackson on the ranch they had built together, under the shade of an old oak tree. Her gravestone read, Lily Reeves, beloved wife, mother and grandmother. She chose hope. And on Jackson's stone, right beside hers, Jackson Reeves, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He chose kindness. Together, those two choices had created something extraordinary. A love story that started with a broken wrist and a simple act of compassion, and grew into a legacy that would last for generations. Their descendants would tell the story for years to come, about the cowboy and the girl he found on a dusty road, about how accidents sometimes lead to miracles, and about how love, real love, can heal even the deepest wounds. The ranch continued to operate for many more years, eventually becoming one of the most successful in the region. James's children took it over, and then their children after them. The house that Jackson built was preserved and expanded, becoming a family gathering place where every summer the Reeves family would come together to celebrate their heritage. And on those summer evenings, when the grandchildren and great-grandchildren would sit on that same porch where Jackson and Lily had spent so many hours, they would look out over the land and remember the love story that had made it all possible. They would think about courage and kindness, about how one man's decision to help a stranger had changed the course of so many lives. The story of Jackson and Lily Reeves became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of compassion, to the idea that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply reach out to someone in pain and offer help. No strings attached, no expectations, just simple human kindness. Their great-granddaughter, Emily, wrote a book about them in 1965, compiling letters and diary entries and family stories into a narrative that captured the essence of their love. The book was published locally and became a surprise success, with people all over Arkansas reading about the cowboy who splinted a girl's wrist and the life they built together. In 1978, on the 100th anniversary of when Jackson and Lily met, the family held a huge reunion on the ranch. Over 200 descendants gathered, spanning 5 generations, all of them there because of that chance meeting on a road outside Benton. The oldest person there was James's daughter, Martha, named after Mrs. Hartley. She was 94 years old and still sharp as a tack. She stood up during the celebration dinner and told the story one more time, the way her father had told it to her, the way her grandmother had confirmed it. "My grandfather Jackson found my grandmother Lily when she had nowhere else to turn," Martha said, her voice wavering but strong. She had been hurt by someone who should have protected her. She was broken, physically and spiritually, and my grandfather, he could have just ridden past. He could have decided it was not his problem, but he did not. He stopped. He helped. He saw another human being in pain, and he did something about it. She paused, looking around at all the faces watching her, at the family that had grown from that one act of kindness. And when he splinted her wrist, when she apologized for the accident that had caused her injury, he said something that became a foundation of their marriage. Accidents happen. He was telling her that mistakes are part of being human, that one moment of clumsiness does not define your worth, that everyone deserves compassion and care. That simple statement, that acknowledgement that we are all fallible and all deserving of grace, that is what started everything. Martha sat down to thunderous applause, and the family spent the rest of the evening sharing memories, looking at old photographs, and marveling at how much had grown from such a simple beginning. The ranch still stands today, now a historical landmark in Arkansas. The Reeves family donated it to the state in 2010 to be preserved as a museum and education center. Visitors can tour the house, see the original room where Jackson and Lily slept, walk the land where they raised their cattle, and learn about life in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. But more than that, they learn about love. They learn about the love story of Jackson and Lily Reeves, about how a broken wrist led to a broken girl finding hope, about how a cowboy's kindness changed the course of history for one family and created a legacy that still inspires people today. In the museum, there is a display case that holds some of Lily's personal items, her mother's shawl, the one she had clutched around herself that first day, a piece of the original splint Jackson had made, her wedding ring, and a journal she kept during the early years of her marriage. Visitors can read excerpts from that journal, can see in her own words how much she loved her husband, how grateful she was for the life they had built together. One entry, dated November 1878, just after their wedding, reads, "Today I became Mrs. Jackson Reeves, and I feel like I have been reborn. The girl who was broken on that road outside Benton is gone, replaced by a woman who knows what real love looks like. Jackson has shown me that kindness is not weakness, that gentleness is not the same as passivity, that a man can be strong and still be tender. He has given me everything, safety, love, a future. But more than that, he has given me back myself. He has shown me that I am worthy of good things, that my past does not define my future, that accidents can lead to miracles. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of his love, trying to build a life that honors the gift he has given me." Reading those words, visitors often find themselves moved to tears, touched by the raw emotion and profound gratitude evident in every line. They leave the museum with a renewed appreciation for the power of kindness, for the importance of reaching out to those in need, for the way one person's actions can ripple out through time and touch countless lives. The story of Jackson and Lily Reeves is more than just a love story, though it certainly is that. It is a story about resilience, about surviving trauma, and finding the strength to trust again. It is a story about the importance of community, of people like the Hartleys who open their home and their hearts to help someone in need. It is a story about the American West, about people carving out lives in a harsh and unforgiving land, about the courage it took to build something from nothing. But at its heart, it is a story about two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose each other every day for the rest of their lives, who built something beautiful and lasting out of pain and hope. It is about a cowboy who saw a girl with a broken wrist and said, "Accidents happen," and in saying it, changed both their lives forever. And that is a story worth remembering, worth sharing, worth celebrating. Because in a world that can often feel cruel and indifferent, it reminds us that kindness matters, that compassion makes a difference, that sometimes all it takes to change someone's life is to stop, to help, to care. The legacy of Jackson and Lily Reeves lives on not just in their descendants, not just in the ranch that bears their name, but in every person who hears their story and decides to be a little kinder, a little more compassionate, a little more willing to help someone in need. And in that way, their love story continues, rippling out through time, touching lives they never knew, creating change they never could have imagined. From a dusty road in Arkansas to a legacy that spans generations, from a broken wrist to a love that conquered all obstacles, theirs is a story that proves what really matters in life. Not wealth or status or power, but love, connection, kindness, the choice to see another person's pain and do something about it. And it all started with 5 simple words: accidents happen, I'll help you. Those words changed everything, creating a love story for the ages, a family that would span generations, and a legacy that reminds us all of what is truly important in this world. Jackson and Lily Reeves found each other when both needed saving. And in saving each other, they created something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. Their story is a testament to the enduring power of love, to the importance of kindness, and to the profound impact one person can have on another's life. It is a story that deserves to be told and retold, remembered and celebrated, because it reminds us of the very best of what humanity can be. And in the end, is that not what we all hope for? To be remembered for our kindness, for our love, for the way we helped others and made the world a little bit better? Jackson and Lily Reeves achieved that and more, and their legacy continues to inspire everyone who hears their remarkable story of love, resilience, and the miraculous way accidents sometimes lead to the most beautiful destinations.